What if I told you that one actor rewrote the rules of Hollywood with just a single line in his contract? An actor who could reject any role, walk away from any studio, and still walk out as the winner. That actor was Steve McQueen, the king of cool. This secret clause made him the highest-paid star of his time. And it left studio bosses furious. But what exactly was this hidden deal, and how did it make Steve McQueen untouchable? To answer that, we have to go back, before the fame, before the fast cars, to the moment Steve McQueen decided he'd never let Hollywood control him. Before Steve McQueen became the king of cool, he was anything but untouchable. His story didn't begin with Hollywood lights or glamorous premieres. It started in the dirt, in broken homes, and on the streets. Born in 1930, McQueen's childhood was marked by instability. His father left when he was just a baby, and his mother struggled with alcoholism. He was passed between relatives, often neglected, and by the age of 9 he was already stealing and fighting just to get by. Reform schools became his second home. He grew up learning fast that if you didn't fight back, the world would crush you. That survival instinct would later become the very thing that set him apart on screen. In his teens, McQueen drifted into the military. He joined the Marines, and even there he clashed with authority. He was demoted multiple times for insubordination, but he also earned respect for his toughness and daring personality. By the time he left the service, he had no clear path, but he had discipline, grit, and the kind of confidence that only comes from living rough. When he stumbled into acting, it wasn't about chasing stardom. At first, it was just another way to pay the bills. But there was something about McQueen that audiences had never seen before. He wasn't polished. He wasn't trying to be the clean-cut hero that studios loved to sell in the 1950s. He was raw, unpredictable, and dangerous. Even when he was silent, his presence filled the screen. His breakout came with the TV series Wanted, Dead or Alive, in 1958. McQueen played bounty hunter Josh Randall, carrying a sawed-off rifle strapped to his hip. The show made him a household name, but more importantly, it proved something critical. Audiences didn't just like Steve McQueen, they believed him. He wasn't acting tough. He was tough. That authenticity became his trademark. But TV wasn't enough. McQueen wanted more than just fame. He wanted control over his career, something most actors didn't even dare to dream about at the time. And as the 1960s began, Hollywood was changing. The studio system that once dictated every actor's move was weakening. A new generation of stars, rebels, outsiders, rule breakers, was rising. And McQueen was ready to claim his place among them. What came next was the turning point. A role and a single sequence that didn't just showcase Steve McQueen as another actor. It elevated him into an icon. A scene so powerful it proved he was more than a star. He was a force. And it was this moment, in front of millions of eyes, that gave McQueen the leverage he needed to demand more than any other actor of his time. By the mid-1960s, Steve McQueen was no longer just another TV cowboy. He had clawed his way into Hollywood's big leagues, and audiences were starting to see him as something different. Not just a leading man, but a symbol of a changing era. He wasn't polished like Cary Grant or larger-than-life like John Wayne. He was quiet, rebellious, and real. And in a decade filled with social unrest, that authenticity connected with people in a way no studio could manufacture. His breakout on the big screen came with The Great Escape in 1963. That single moment, McQueen gunning a stolen motorcycle across barbed wire fences in a daring escape from a Nazi camp, wasn't just a stunt. It became one of the most famous sequences in film history. And it told the world exactly who Steve McQueen was: fearless, independent, and impossible to ignore. But McQueen wasn't satisfied with being Hollywood's newest hero. He wanted control, and he wanted to define his own legacy. That opportunity arrived in 1968 with a film that would change cinema forever, Bullitt. The movie gave McQueen the chance to be both actor and architect. He insisted on doing his own driving during the film's legendary car chase, a sequence that roared through the streets of San Francisco and set a new standard for action filmmaking. 10 minutes of screeching tires, roaring engines, and no music. Just raw adrenaline. It was gritty, real, and decades later, it's still considered the greatest car chase ever filmed. Audiences didn't just watch Bullitt, they felt it. They felt McQueen's cool silence, his calculated intensity, his control behind the wheel. He wasn't just playing a cop. He was showing the world that he could bend an entire film to his will. And Hollywood noticed. Suddenly, Steve McQueen wasn't just a star. He was a man who could open movies, dictate terms, and rewrite the rules. The studios needed him more than he needed them. And that's when McQueen made his boldest move. Hidden inside his contracts, he introduced a secret clause, one that gave him leverage no other actor had ever dared to demand. By the late 1960s, Steve McQueen was no longer just an actor. He was a force of nature, a man who could carry a film on his name alone. And that's when he pulled off one of the boldest power moves in Hollywood history, a secret clause that would change the way studios negotiated with stars. Here's how it worked. McQueen's contracts included what insiders called the favored nations clause. In simple terms, it guaranteed that if another actor in the film was paid more than him, McQueen's salary would automatically rise to match it. No arguments, no renegotiations. If you wanted McQueen, you had to pay him as much as, or more than, anyone else on the set. It was a brilliant move. Studios couldn't lowball him, rivals couldn't outbid him. And even if McQueen turned a role down, the clause meant that the very threat of his involvement could drive salaries higher for everyone. He had turned Hollywood's own system into a weapon, one that always worked in his favor. The clause didn't just protect his paycheck, it cemented his image as the man in control. For decades, actors had been at the mercy of studios, forced to accept whatever terms were offered. McQueen flipped that power dynamic upside down. Suddenly, he wasn't chasing studios. Studios were chasing him. But this secret clause did more than pad McQueen's bank account. It ignited rivalries. His peers knew that if they starred opposite him, they were either going to be second best or make him even richer. And no one felt that tension more than Paul Newman. Their rivalry became legendary. Every negotiation, every billing credit, every paycheck turned into a silent battle for dominance. McQueen's clause wasn't just a contract trick. It was a declaration of war. And when the two biggest stars of their generation finally faced off on the same movie poster, the entire industry held its breath. If there was one man who felt the sting of McQueen's contract clause more than anyone else, it was Paul Newman. Both men were icons of their generation, handsome, charismatic, and box office gold. But where Newman was polished, articulate, and often considered the actor's actor, McQueen was raw, silent, and unpredictable. They were opposites in style, but equals in fame, and when equals collide, sparks fly. Their rivalry came to a head in the mid-1970s when both were cast in The Towering Inferno, the disaster blockbuster that paired two of Hollywood's biggest names. On paper, it was a dream team. In reality, it was a chess match. From the very beginning, every detail became a battle. Who would get top billing? Whose name would appear first on the poster? And thanks to McQueen's favored nations clause, who would walk away with the bigger paycheck? McQueen wasn't about to play second fiddle to anyone, not even Paul Newman. He demanded equal lines of dialogue so that Newman couldn't overshadow him. He insisted that his name appear on the left side of the poster, knowing that audiences read from left to right. And of course, his clause guaranteed that whatever Newman was paid, McQueen would match. The tension bled onto the set. While the film became a hit, earning millions at the box office, insiders whispered that the behind-the-scenes battle was far more dramatic than the fire raging on screen. For McQueen, it wasn't just about money. It was about proving that no one, not even Paul Newman, could outrank him. Audiences may have seen two heroes fighting a blaze on screen, but Hollywood knew the truth. This was a duel for supremacy, and McQueen's secret clause gave him the upper hand. But every war has consequences. McQueen's demands made him powerful, but they also made him difficult. Studio executives began to wonder if his untouchable status was worth the chaos he left behind. And soon, that same clause that had made McQueen a legend would begin to fuel resentment and push him toward a very different kind of Hollywood battle. For a time, Steve McQueen's secret clause made him Hollywood's most powerful actor. He was untouchable. Studios bent to his demands, rivals measured themselves against him, and audiences lined up for every new release. But in Hollywood, power always comes with a price. Behind closed doors, studio executives began to grow frustrated. McQueen's clause meant higher costs, longer negotiations, and constant battles over billing and screen time. Producers who once begged for his name on a poster started whispering that he was impossible to work with. And in an industry that thrives on control, McQueen's defiance didn't make him a partner. It made him a problem. The cracks started to show in the late 1970s. Scripts that once would have been offered to McQueen were now going to safer, more cooperative stars. Some projects collapsed entirely because McQueen refused to compromise. He had turned down roles that could have cemented his legend even further. Films like Apocalypse Now and Dirty Harry, simply because the deals didn't fit his terms. To some, it looked like arrogance. To others, it looked like a man refusing to be owned. But the backlash wasn't just about contracts. Fame itself was wearing on him. McQueen had always been a loner, a rebel who preferred the roar of a motorcycle to the chaos of a studio meeting. As his reputation hardened, he pulled away from Hollywood altogether, spending more time on racetracks, in garages, and in the desert than on film sets. For McQueen, the clause had done its job. It gave him freedom, money, and control. But it also isolated him. The same system he had outsmarted was now quietly pushing him to the sidelines. Yet even as Hollywood turned its back, the public never stopped watching. McQueen's mystique only grew as he drifted further from the spotlight. And while the studios may have seen a difficult actor, audiences saw something else. A man who lived and died on his own terms. And that's the paradox of Steve McQueen's story. The very clause that made him untouchable also made him an outsider. But in the end, it cemented a legacy that no studio could erase. When Steve McQueen passed away in 1980 at just 50 years old, Hollywood lost more than a star. It lost a symbol, a man who had shown that actors could seize control of their own destinies. His films, his style, even the way he carried himself all fed into the legend of the King of Cool. But behind that image was something far more lasting, the secret clause that made him untouchable. That single line in his contracts didn't just protect his salary, it reshaped the balance of power in Hollywood. For decades, actors had been at the mercy of the studios. They were told what roles to play, how much they would earn, and even how they should live. McQueen flipped that script. He showed that if you had the talent, the charisma, and the courage, you could make Hollywood bend to you. Today, clauses like McQueen's are standard for top actors. Favored nations deals, profit participation, and creative control are all part of the industry playbook. But in the 1960s, no one had dared to push that far. McQueen's rebellion opened the door for everyone who came after, from Al Pacino and Jack Nicholson to modern megastars like Tom Cruise and Denzel Washington. And yet, McQueen's legacy isn't just about money or contracts. It's about independence. He wasn't afraid to walk away from a role, no matter how big, if it meant giving up control. He wasn't afraid to anger the studios, or to demand what he believed he was worth. That stubbornness cost him opportunities, but it also made him unforgettable. Even now, decades after his passing, Steve McQueen's story continues to inspire. His films are studied, his style is copied, and his attitude still defines what it means to be a rebel in Hollywood. The clause that once seemed outrageous is now part of the system he helped transform. Steve McQueen didn't just star in movies. He rewrote the script of what it meant to be a movie star. And that's why, even today, the King of Cool remains untouchable.